You thought I was done, didn't you? I'm not. Hi everybody, I'm Violet, and I'm back. Picking up all the dirt and throwing it elsewhere. But anyways, I do thoroughly think that everybody needs a game that pushes them to their limit. You know? Like, I think everybody needs that. They need that game that will push them to their limit and give them a brain blast, as you, if you will. For me, like, there was a game that just, like, irrevocably broke my brain to the point where I was just like, okay, I have awakened to a higher being. And it's because up to that point, I had only played, like, third-person shooters and, like, survival horror games and whatnot. I had never really, or just like RPGs or JRPGs, I had never really had that strategy mindset. Oh no. Yeah, that's right, bitch. I turned griefing off. But I but yeah, for me that game was Fire Emblem. It was Fire Emblem Three Houses. I had a friend who told me about it. And basically it was just like, you will love this game. You just need to try it. And playing that game changed me such a great deal. Don't get me wrong, like, I love that game. But it made my brain work in ways it shouldn't. If that makes sense. And I'm honestly glad it did. Because honestly, if it didn't, I don't know how my brain would work now. And I kind of like how my brain works. Nice, nice. We're getting it figured out. Okay, let's do that. Put it under here. Give see if we can make it give Pavilion to an extent. Yeah, when I played Three Houses, I started to realize my brain didn't work the way that game expected it to. And I started to change, and my interest in like certain types of video games began to change with it. And I grew to love Fire Emblem. I grew to love those characters in that game. And like to this day, like I have friends who like Three Houses, but like dislike certain aspects of it. Like the fact that it is a split story rather than just, you know, being a... Instead of, you know, Three Houses being a... just one full story, it's split between 3 different houses and like 4 different timelines. And honestly, like, respect, but also like I really like how janky the timeline and everything is in that game. I think it's fun. So I don't really have any issues with the game itself. Okay, let's do a bit of this. Nice. I did always get like the same response from my friends each and every time they heard like what my favorite house was. But the reason I picked the house is because every time I heard somebody talk about Three Houses, they always like avoided talking about this house, and they were always just like, oh well, like they're like whatever, like they're boring as hell. And I was like, okay. And like there was a part of me that was just like, well, nobody loves this house. Like I want to love this house. So I played it and I didn't regret it. I played the Blue Lions for the first playthrough. And anybody who is a fan of those games, first off, I just want to say, I get it. Really. Like, I get why people don't play Blue Lion. I understand. It's because most people play Black Eagle first, and then they hate Dimitri because of Black Eagle. But at the same time, I had the opposite experience. So, you know. I think the Blue Lions have like the best, most well-rounded cast of characters, because they have the best healer and the best archer in the whole game. And also any one of the like leader units of like the leader of the house units, like Dimitri, Claude, or Edelgard, they're all crazy busted. So like it's just a good time because they're all crazy busted. Like Dimitri just becomes an unstoppable force of nature, and it's kind of funny how much of a force of nature he is, because he will just rip people to shreds, and it's kind of funny. But anyways, like Fire Emblem changed the way I thought about things, and it led to me playing games like, I actually ended up specifically looking up like strategy JRPGs. And that's where my love affair with like Trails of Cold Steel began, and like my love affair with like Valkyria Chronicles, which are amazing games, to be sure. I thoroughly love those games, actually. Oh dear lord, what's happening? Okay. Ah, I am out of stairs. That is problem. For the time being, let me just do this. But again, I do love like strategy based games nowadays. And initially that was not how it was. I was not huge on strategy games. In fact, I probably talked a lot of shit on them, even though those games generally did nothing wrong. I just didn't like them and didn't really have a particular reason. It was more of a, I didn't want to try them, so I just made up excuses. And when I eventually did try those games, I fell in love with them. Like, Cold Steel has, like, a dating sim aspect to it as well, which makes it a very fun game. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever played Cold Steel here, but I've played all of the Cold Steel games. They're some of my favorite games I've ever played. Honestly, like, they are. I'm gonna go steal some shit from this village. Oh. For the time being, it looks ugly. I'll figure it out later, though. Mine. So that I don't have to make one. bread, apple, meat. I'm just gonna put the seeds, all of it, for now in here. Yep, there we go. There we go. Oh. Yeah, I've of course been in many situations of like having games that I love to play and maybe those games not always coming out in a way that I wish they would. Like I said, like Resident Evil 3 Remake, like I said in the previous one, because I ranted about the game literally the whole video pretty much. But there have been other situations, like there have been other games where I was expecting so much more and then just got dookie fodder. Specifically, there's it's stuff like I heard that like the Tales series was amazing. And those of you who don't know what I mean, I'm talking like Tales of Arise, Tales of Vesperia, Tales of Berseria, Tales of Abyss, like stuff like that. The first one I got was Zestiria because I saw gameplay for it. And then I very quickly realized that I loved the story for Zestiria, but I hated the gameplay. The mechanics were like painful. And I put myself through a great deal of pain and suffering with that because I played through the whole game all the way to the ending, only to get to the end and not be able to beat the final boss because even at the end of the game, I still did not understand the game mechanics. Which in and of itself is a problem. I didn't understand that the game literally forced itself to be a certain type of way. And by that, I mean the game quite literally was just like, oh, you're not using a certain type of gear with like certain affinities to it. Yeah, you're just not going to be able to fight the final boss. I was crushed, by the way, because I had spent hours in this game getting better at like the gameplay. And then I find out because the gear I was using didn't have like the ability for me to deal more damage against a against a against the final boss, because the final boss is a dragon type monster. Because I didn't have that affinity on my gear, I lost. Like, I got to the point where I could, if I so wished, like, fight the boss. I fought the boss, I could deal damage to the boss, and I would get the boss's health down to like the final sliver of health, and then I would die, and I would have to start at the first phase again. It was infuriating because it was a sobering experience of you can't always brute force your way through something. You're gonna need a plan sometimes. You can't just run in like a maniac and oh, excuse me. And like you can't run in like a maniac and just expect it all to brute force its way out, because it won't work that way all the time. Sometimes you do need to have a plan. And it got to the point where my brain functions like when I play video games, I think tactically. I think of what I could do tactically to make something better, how I can get the most out of what I'm doing now. And with Minecraft, that's not exactly a thing. Like, you don't really think about strategy when you play Minecraft unless you're talking about the bill. Also, if you don't know what I just said, I said the bill. It's it was Minecraft story mode. There was a thing where he was just like, you gotta say the build, but the way it came out, it sounded like he screamed save the bill, and it just made me laugh. Also, the fact he had a pig named Ruben is very funny. But regardless, like Cold Steel, you can like rearrange how your Arcus works. Like, you can basically, by swapping out the core of your Arcus with any other core you have, you can effectively change your character's fighting style. You can turn them from this stalwart damage dealer into a speed tank that can't be touched because you're a menace to society. And it's honestly a great time. You could be a speed tank, you could be a tank. You could be a spellcaster. Like, it has all kinds of like crazy shit you can do in that game. And I think that's why I love that game so much, and why I loved playing through all four of them, including like including playing through Reverie, because I played through Trails into Reverie, and that game's great as well. And in my opinion, one of the few times they've done like interlocking stories and it worked. Like, it successfully got its point across, it was a good idea, and it worked. Okay, let's do this. I know it might look rough around the edges right now. For the time being, it will. It's just how it needs to look right now. Because I need just a basic house for the time being. And then I'll work my way up from there. I, of course, like I've said many times at this point, I do like survival horror games, but in the same vein, I also do need to, like, play other things. Like, I thought about playing Evil Within on the channel, and I just could not bring myself to want to do that. Because Evil Within's good, but everything they do in Evil Within is then years later done a million times better in the Resident Evil 4 remake. Like, I think the best thing that Evil Within did was the aesthetic. Because it gives that really nice aesthetic that makes you feel like you're inside of, like, a psychological thriller while you're, like, basically trapped inside of STEM and, like, trying to figure out what STEM is. And it's honestly great. Like, even the weapons that you use in the game are, like, from around a certain time period. And I love that too. And honestly, one of my favorite things is the fact that, like, the shotgun that you use in Evil Within 1 is a trench gun. Like, that's really cool. Those of you who don't know what a trench gun is, it's a shotgun they kept in the trenches in World War One. And it's a pump action, but it's just the fact that the design itself is that of a trench gun. And, like, even, like, your basic pistol is like a like an Italian looking revolver. Like, it's just cool. Okay? Like, in my opinion, it is just cool. I love that type of aesthetic. It gives this older noir aesthetic with a psychological thriller slash horror type feel to it. And I think Evil Within 1 like strives with that. Like, it strives for that, and it thrives as that, is what I meant. And I've actually, like, talked to my friends before about, like, the difference of, like, different series and what they do well. And, like, for me, one of those series, like, you have, like, Silent Hill, which, like, excels at psychological horror, because Silent Hill differs depending on who's there. It's all based around, like, the psyche of the person who's there, and that's how Resident Evil and Silent Hill differ. Resident Evil is usually, like, you're thrown in as this protagonist. You aren't always necessarily given a backstory from jump, but, like, you'll find out, like, the person's whole goal, like, at the beginning. Like, you'll find out, oh, I came to this city because I now have a job as a cop, and I'm curious what's going on in the city, and now I'm trapped here. But, or, like, I came here to find my brother. He's also a cop. That deal. It's like the whole thing is quite literally Resident Evil from the start gives you your character's intentions and like a simple backstory. But you learn more about the character in a different way as you play. You begin to learn who the character is through their actions rather than their past. Necessarily. And like I think that's a good way to do it, and I think that's why Resident Evil is a good like starter series for people. Silent Hill is a bit more complex because they give you like a baseline character who you learn nothing about in the beginning, and then you have to discover more about as time goes on. Because that's the thing about Silent Hill is that if you're there, you've probably done some vile things. You've probably done something really fucked up that your mind is torturing you about. That's what Silent Hill is. And it's great. Like, by the end of the game, you could go from rooting for the protagonist to hating them for something that they've done in the past. And I think that that is a unique trait that I have not seen in any other series of video games. And it's honestly great. Like, it's just by design, man. But at the same time, you have a series like Fatal Frame, which draws upon like old superstitions of like it draws on old superstitions of things like taking pictures of a spirit. And like it goes with the idea and runs with it. The idea that not only do cameras capture spirits and trap them, they can be used as a tool of exorcism by trapping the spirit inside the film on camera. And like Fatal Frame plays out like a Japanese ghost story. And that is great on so many levels, because if you've not listened to one or like read one, Japanese ghost stories are very unique and aesthetic. And like the closest I could say that we have in America are based off of movies that were originally like Chinese ghost, well, not Chinese. Oh, dear Lord. My brain is just for like background. I'm literally filming this at 4 a.m. So my brain's just not going to work right. So please don't take any offense to anything I might say incorrectly. I'm not trying to. My brain is just actually dead. Okay. Yeah, it looks great. But yeah, the closest thing to an actual like Japanese ghost story I can think of off the rip is one that's actually based on one. Well, two that are actually based on them. Because in America, we have two movies known as... One is known as The Grudge. The other is known as The Ring. And I think they're both based off of like a similar spirit in like Japanese folklore. And it's terrifying and horrific and also just so interesting. Because like ghost stories in America at times can be very boring. It's fun to like look at perspective sometimes and just like seeing difference. And like it's the same with music, like listening to music from a different culture or even a different just country in general gives such a different feel than if you were to just listen to something static from America. I personally like listening to all types of music. Like in Resident Evil 1, when you play the Moonlight Sonata, I fell in love with that song because of Resident Evil, but I stayed because of Ludwig von Beethoven. It's classical, and I don't listen to classical that often, but classical music is still amazing. As a thing, even now. But, like, then you've got, like, the blues, which blues is the birth of all modern music. Like, you can draw lines from modern music back to blues. And it's honestly kind of interesting, to say the least. I think I'm gonna turn this into like a lake or something. Like rock and roll especially directly spawns from blues. It's country music and rock and roll are both different products of blues. And that is just so crazy to think about, that they both came from the same place but are so wholly different. Mm. And it's like that with storytelling too. As it is with music, it is in other forms of art. And I love that. Oh, it's the cat that's trapped inside of the cow pen. There you go, buddy. Again, it's, of course, it's all subjective. The types of stories you like are the types of stories you like, just as the type of music you listen to is the type of music you listen to. And there's nothing wrong with liking a type of music. There's nothing wrong with liking a type of storytelling. It's just whatever flavor appeals to you. Just so happens that for me, most of the time, it's video games as a storytelling medium. Stuff like God of War Ragnarok, or even Final Fantasy 16, which was a game I waited for so long and was so much better than I ever thought it could be. And yet the game did not disappoint. I think my biggest gripe initially was like, well, why is his name Clive? That's all I could think of the whole time. Why is the main character's name Clive? And then I thought about it. And like realized his name made sense for what they were trying to do with the storytelling and with the character. And I legitimately love that game now. It, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but it does in its own way feel like a masterpiece. And there are other games as well, like people love their Legend of Zelda, people love people love their and it feels silly to say it, but people love their their Mario, and which is probably the simplest type of video game storytelling I can think of. There we go. I'm also a big fan of horror movies as well, which I also understand are not everybody's cup of tea, but I love them. It's just how I am. My brain loves those types of movies because I grew up watching them. And I love the deep and in-depth lore for horror movies and stuff sometimes. It just hits so different, which is why I love I'm subscribed to the YouTube channel Dead Meat because I watch the kill count. It's because James A. Janice not only gives you in-depth backstory on the production of the movie, he also gives you more than that. He gives you that in-depth backstory on the movie itself, but he also just gives you the kills and gives you comedy and gives you joy along with all of it. And I have fun with that. Because I have a lot of good memories with older horror movies that I grew up watching. Stuff specifically Dream Warriors comes to mind, and I love Dream Warriors. That movie's great. And in my opinion, will always be great. I need to get more. But then you've got stuff like Halloween. I'm not talking about the Rob Zombie one. I'm talking about like original John Carpenter Halloween. Is also amazing. It's a masterpiece of a movie, and I don't think it will ever reach a point in time where it's outdated. Because the movie holds up really well because of how they tell their story. And I legitimately love that movie. I think Halloween 1 is great because of the anxiety of it all. But at the same time, I think that Halloween 2 is good because like there's nowhere to run. Like she's literally trapped in a hospital, cut off from everybody, and has to deal with Michael again. So yeah, I love it. Once I have enough, I think I'll continue doing what I did, patching up the green on either side. All right. I wonder what I should use for just the floor. Yeah, well, I'll figure it out eventually. But until then, because my brain is slowly shutting down, I'm gonna hop off of here and probably go to sleep. Because I've been awake for a great deal of time. In about 4 hours, it would have been like 24 hours. But yeah, until next time, I've been Violet, and I hope you enjoyed just sitting here and listening to me ramble on for the last few videos. And if you have, I hope you'll come back and do it again. I'm Violet, and have a good one, guys.